Morning, everybody. How are we doing today? Good? Yeah? Fourth week of this series on the 10 Commandments. I've been excited to preach in this series, just to preach in front of this. Like, it just seems so cool. Do I look cooler standing in front of this thing? This is awesome. So good. So we're in the fourth week, but the third commandment today. So let's just jump right in. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. So I don't know about you, but at first glance, this seems like one of the 10 commandments that was some like discipline, maybe with a little bit of effort. We can all obey this one, right? Like, is it just sort of saying like, just don't say GD or JC, just period. Just don't do it. I don't care if you accidentally like smash your thumb with a hammer when you're pounding in a nail, or you step on a Lego right when you're barefoot. Like, just don't say those words. Say something else, like good golly, Miss Molly, or say Jiminy Christmas, which is my favorite, by the way. Like, come on, what does that even mean? Jiminy Christmas. You're watching the Steeler game. You're upset with the play calling. Don't say it. Don't do it. You're you hit your drive right in the fairway. Take that 3-wood out and slice it right into the woods. Don't you say it, right? Is that what this commandment says? Is that what this one means? Just side note, aren't you glad that Amanda Beggs is a regular rotation on the Northway teaching team? Yeah, but for a couple reasons. One, she's gifted. She's a gifted teacher. She's brilliant. But also, because I don't know, my examples and some of the other guys on the teaching teams, at least for me personally, often come from my caveman mind. You know what I mean? My examples and analogies are boxing stories or slicing 3-woods or smashing my thumb with a hammer. Amanda brings a really healthy female balance with the examples that she uses, doesn't she? Like women, does that help? She gets up there and she talks about birthing babies, right? Right? She talks about being a mom. One time she even talked about breastfeeding her child. And right before she gave the analogy, she said, Scott Stevens, I know this is going to make you squirm, but I've sat through your boxing analogy since I was in college. And she talked about being a nursing mom, and I squirmed. I was very uncomfortable. I can tell you one time my uncomfortable meter really went off. Many years ago, I was asked to speak at a MOPS meeting. So the MOPS meeting is the mothers of preschoolers. So picture Scotty with 30 or 40 mothers of preschoolers. And some of these mothers of preschoolers also had newborns. And as I got up to speak, those newborns all seemed to get hungry, I guess, at the same time. And blankets were thrown over the appropriate places, but they did not exit the room. And I started to hear noises coming from under the blankets. I couldn't make eye contact. I didn't know where to look. I literally just turned around and went, Jiminy Christmas, what is going on in here? So I'm glad Amanda's on our teaching team. So is that what this third commandment means? Seriously, does this mean don't say JC or GD and if not, if you do, God's going to hold it against you? Or was this meant maybe to even be broader than that, to include all swearing? Maybe it just simply applies some discipline, clean up your potty mouth, and you can put a check beside number 3. I'm good with this one. And move on to number 4. If that's it, frankly, to me, it doesn't seem to compare to significance with the other commandments, right? They talk about not having another God before the one and only God. They talk about murder, adultery, stealing. And then this one, is it just simply stop cursing? See, when it comes to Scripture, sometimes we must know what was meant before we can know what it means. And what was meant by this commandment is much more than having a potty mouth. In week 1 of this series, Dave sort of introduced, our lead pastor, Dave D'Angelo, he introduced the 10 Commandments and where we were headed over the next several weeks. And he said two things like that just really struck me like, One was this. He said that God did not give these commandments to the nation of Israel in the midst of like complete rebellion. They weren't at this time running around murdering each other or stealing and following other gods like in this complete downward spiral. It's not like God gave these commandments to his people as like some last-ditch effort. Y'all are a mess. Here, do these. Stop messing up. Do these, or else I'm done with you. No. He gave them to his people right after they spent 400 years in slavery in Egypt. These were given to God's people at a time when God heard their cry. He sends Moses. They are led out. He says, and he's basically saying, I love you. I heard you. You are my people. And it's like he's saying, these are some like really beautiful instructions for God followers. And he gave them to the people to intend to help them stay close to him, and then for us to live in harmony with one another. And the other thing that Dave said in the beginning, just to introduce this series, he reminded us that these were words spoken by God. Like, I don't know, sometimes we just take that, maybe don't think about that. God spoke these. These are his words. In the ancient world, these were often referred to as God's 10 words, not necessarily God's 10 commandments. These are 10 rules to live by. These were 10 words to keep us safe, not to keep us in line. And he spoke these words. I want to go back to another time that God spoke in the scriptures. The very first time he spoke, way back in Genesis 1:1, he says this, in the beginning, it says God created the heavens and the earth. God's story, the Bible does not start with a geocentric description of the universe and of earth and heaven. It does not even begin with mentioning us at all. It unapologetically turns our focus to where our focus should be. In the beginning, God created every single thing. And how did he create it? He spoke. He said, let there be light. And there was. He said, let there be water. And it appeared. At one point, there was nothing but God. And then God speaks, and creation leaps into being. Physicists, they call this ex nihilo. It basically means out of nothing comes something. And how did God do that? With his words. He spoke. At a young age, my daughter, Erin, she always had this like creative, I don't know, I just call it like a decorating skill. Her apartment now, like it's just cool. Like you just walk in, it's all together, it's like really slick. And when she was like 10 years old, she would decorate her room for Christmas. And she would work on it for weeks. She'd take some of our old decorations, she'd go to a craft store, she would buy stuff, she'd look through magazines, she'd watch some things on TV, and then she'd shut her door and she would just go to work. And we couldn't see it till it was done. And when she would unveil it, like you'd walk in, you just like wow, like that's beautiful. Like she took stuff and she shaped it and she thought of things that I could never think of. She took our old stuff and she added new stuff and she came up with ideas and textures and lighting, and it just created such a cool Christmas vibe in her room at the age of 10. It was like so creative, but hear me, like hear my point on that. She started with stuff. All humanity, creativity. All human creativity, even the most creative people in the world, it's just the vaguest whisper to the creativity of our God. Like he didn't start with stuff. He started with nothing, and he speaks. And that nothing becomes something. None of us have ever created like that. He did it with speaking. He spoke words and it became creation. He is the creator of everything we see, everything we know, everything that has life, everything that has breath, all through his words. Therefore, every time that God speaks in the scriptures, we should pay attention. And we should absorb them, that when he speaks, that comes with power, like with wonder, with awe. But also, folks, when God speaks something, his words, we should respect them. We should revere them. We should have a really healthy fear when God speaks something. God created it, he owns it, and folks, we are guests in his creation. When traveling, I don't know about you, but when traveling, there's a difference between staying in a hotel and staying at a friend's house, right? You know what I mean by that? When you stay at a friend's house, I tend to respect and follow my friend's house rules closely, right? Rather than sometimes if I stay at a hotel, there's rules, but they're just sort of suggestions, right? See, we behave and we relate differently to things when we take consideration of who owns them. Think about the way you treat a rental car versus the way maybe you would treat your dad's car. When your dad gave you his car to take that special person out on a date, right? You treated that a little differently than you treat a rental car. We take greater care when we know the owner. Folks, God spoke creation into account because he is glorious beyond all measure. And he created us to declare his name and his glory. As followers, if we call ourselves God followers, yes, I believe in God, yes, I believe in Jesus. If you call yourself that, then your sole purpose is to be a loudspeaker for his glorious name. Our loudspeaker, what comes out of our mouth is not to glorify us. It's to glorify him. And God spoke in the beginning, and then many, many, many years go by, and God speaks again. He rescues his people, and he speaks these 10 words, these 10 commandments to his people. These powerful words are from the same God that spoke creation into being. These words are beautiful. Folks, we have to see these words as timeless. Some laws in our world, they're time-bound. You know what I mean by that? They apply to an aspect of our culture maybe, or they're relevant for a season. Example, there was once a law that stated that a horse, a carriage that was drawn by more than 4 horses had the right of way at all time. Probably not a necessary law for today, right? You know what I mean? There are laws that are time-bound. These laws are timeless. These commandments, these words, as a God follower, they apply to you regardless of where you live on earth and what culture that you live in. They applied then, they apply now, and they'll apply forever. And with all that in mind, the third commandment, God's word says, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. And I think that means so much more than don't use God's name when you swear. So let me pull apart 2 words in that commandment. First one is just the word name there. Don't take the name of the Lord your God. Name, right? My name, it's Scott. When you dig into the heritage of it or the meaning of it or what's behind that name, lots of different things, but the one sort of prevalent one, Scott, literally means the man with the shield. Sort of cool. I don't own a shield. I really doesn't have anything to do with my character or who I am. Basically, talking to my mom, we're sort of Irish and Scottish and English is where are we all from, and she liked the name Scott. My dad used to like this song, Watching Scotty Grow. So I got named Scott. That's it. Not a big deal. I like my name. God's name is different. God's name here, it's the name Yahweh. And it's deeply connected to his character, his soul, his very presence. It's the I am. Any time back in this time when they would speak that name out loud, oh my gosh, they would do it with such fear and such reverence when they would say that name. So much so that in this time, it was like very rarely even appropriate to say that name out loud because it was so sacred and so holy. Also, did you notice in this commandment, it does not say you shall not speak the name of the Lord. It says you shall not take. And when you dig into like the Hebrew and stuff in there, it's not really even linked to verbiage or language. It's this word take. This commandment is not simply limited to what you say or if you swear. It pertains to everything that you do and everything that you are. When you identify yourself as a God follower, then all of you, not just what you say, reflects God's name. It reflects God's character. It reflects God's glory. In the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus gathers his disciples and they want to know how to pray. And Jesus says, pray then like this, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Right away, Jesus is saying, holy. His name, hallowed be it. It is holy. See, when we take on his name as God followers, that name is holy. And then you are then a loudspeaker for his character. There was this roller skating rink by my house where I grew up in Munhall. And when you walked into it, they put a stamp on your hand to say that you paid. And it's sort of cool. Like back in the day, this was sort of cool. You looked at it, you couldn't see nothing. Like, oh, they missed me, they didn't stamp me. So then you go into the roller skating rink. It was lit by black light, and like you'd look, and then you could see the stamp. Like, pretty cool, right? Back in the day, it was high tech back then. Just blew me away, right? Like, wow, stamp on your hand. But at least like track with me that if you call yourself a God follower, then his name is stamped on you. You've said it, now it's stamped on you. And you represent him. And you represent his character. Names are important. Man, if I just press on that for a little bit, this word name in there, it's so important. Some of you are going to push back on me in these next two thoughts. So what? I hear some folks, that they take the phrase Abba Father, in the New Testament, Abba Father. And they take the word Abba and they refer to it as daddy. I don't know if you've ever been, and I'm not being critical of this. You've ever been in a circle and somebody will open up their prayer by saying daddy? Daddy? And then they'll go into the prayer. And in Aramaic, Jesus said this, and so did Paul in the New Testament. They used it to characterize this intimate relationship with God. But it is also a term of such great, reverence. Frankly, the name Daddy to me, it's just too familiar. I'm still amazed in the scriptures when Jesus says, I no longer call you servants, I call you my friend. I can accept that because he said it. I still have a hard time just getting my hands around it, but I can accept it. Jesus says I'm his friend, okay. But you know what? Jesus is never going to be my buddy. He's not my homeboy. That's just too superficial. Yeah, we might be friends, but we're not peers. We're not equals. His name is just carries too much respect. We should have too much respect and fear of the name of God to turn it into some kind of bumper sticker or T-shirt. Some of you are definitely going to push back to me on this one. My second thought here. And again, I'm just trying to stress the importance of names. I never refer to my wife as my best friend because I believe that name is too low of a description of what she is. When I married her, we became one. No longer two, but one flesh. When I exchanged vows with her, it was things like whether we're in sickness or in health, no matter whether we've got a lot or we are in want. I took a holy, biblical, spiritual covenant with her. It's unconditional. It's all in. The names are important, and names have power and significance. She's not my buddy. She's my wife. I try not to diminish like the name of who she is to me. I never want to diminish the power and the name of God. He is Lord, who is and who was and who is to come. Like he is the Almighty. In the Third Commandment, that is what is meant when it says the name of the Lord your God. It's commanding us to revere that name. And the second word in there I just want to pull apart for a minute is just that word vain. What does that mean? You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Well, the word vain here, digging into it, it means to take something lightly. It literally means emptiness, nothingness. Vain is devoid of any power or significance. It's like it doesn't matter. So clearly, right, when you use the Lord's name in a curse word, like that is taking the Lord's name in vain. That is using it in such an empty, hollow, meaningless. You're taking this powerful name and you're just throwing it into a sentence frivolously. That's taking the Lord's name in vain. But, I think there's other ways we can take the Lord's name in vain without even realizing it. Have you ever relayed a story to someone and at the end of it you say, I swear to God, that's the way it happened? You're late on a project or on a deadline and you say, I swear to God, it wasn't my fault. I won't ever let that happen again. When you do that, you're trying to enhance your credibility by using God's name. And that is like so inconsistent to who he is and how powerful that name is. By doing this, like it's empty. I swear to God, right? Have you ever used God's name as a smokescreen? Maybe you're asked to volunteer. Maybe it's something here at church. Somebody comes up to you and says, hey, I want you to consider doing this. Or maybe it's at like your kid's school or something and somebody wants you to volunteer. Would you consider doing this? And you really, you say, well, I'll tell you what, let me pray about that. And I'll get back to you. And you don't really pray because you don't really have any intention of doing that. And a few days later, you go back to the person and say, I sense that God just doesn't want me to step into it at this time. That's vain. That's vain. You're a young person and you're dating someone. And you decide you don't want to date them anymore. Found somebody else. Dude has bad breath. I don't know. You say, I've been praying to God about this. And I just sense from God that we're just supposed to be friends. Jeez, that's the stab in the heart right there. Just be friends. That's vain. Come on. Just say you don't want to date anymore. Don't be bringing God's name into it, right? Another one is what I call lip service. This is when we speak hallowed words about God, but we live hollow lives, right? We're the first person to throw out some really good godly wisdom, but we're acting like a fool. We speak about the goodness and the generosity of God, but we're rarely generous with our money. It's when you're that first person to publicly pray. You're in a prayer group and man, I'm going to throw up some prayer. Here I go. Or you're the person, you time it perfectly during worship and you throw their hands up. But you have not sat down and prayed in a quiet time to the Lord with nobody watching. You have not adored the Lord in some quiet worship time in months. It's vain. So that is what is meant by, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. It's cursing for sure, but it's also using his name inconsistently or as a smokescreen or as lip service. And I'm not sick. I got allergies. So you can shake my hand afterwards if you want to or say hello. It's allergies. I'm not sick. The third commandment, it ends with, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless who takes his name in vain. I really wish that part wasn't in there. Because I'm guilty. I've been known to use a bad word or two. I can send up a smoke screen with the best of them. I've done my fair share of lip service as a God follower. God has every right to hold me guilty for using his name in vain with my mouth and with my actions. When Dave said we were going to get into this 10 Commandment series back in this summer, he's such a good job of laying these things out well ahead of time so that we can, and I've done some study on the 10 Commandments, and every time I've studied the 10 Commandments, it's like, ow, because I'm not very good at keeping any of them. Like God sent them out there as this bar, and I don't reach that, I don't jump over that bar. That's what happens when I've studied the 10 Commandments. It's an ouch. You know, his word, try to follow with me, spoke everything in the creation. These 10 words that we're studying, he spoke them and he set them as a bar. And so often they reveal my guilt. But thank God that about 1,300 or so years later, after he spoke those 10 commandments, he didn't just leave us with the law, that he also knew that grace was coming in a word. And in John, the Gospel of John, the very first chapter, verse, it says, in the beginning was the Word. Here comes a new word. Oh, thank God for this word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. Jesus, folks, he was there with God when he spoke everything into existence. He was there. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. When God spoke those 10 commandments to the people, Jesus knew that someday he would need to go and be the grace that comes with the truth, to be able to show the lightness in a very dark hearts of all of us. He was there. He was coming to provide hope through faith. Jesus would be God's words, his new words in flesh. It says there was a man sent from God whose name was John. That's John the Baptist there. He came as a witness to bear witness about the light that all might believe through him. He was not the light, John the Baptist, but he came to bear the witness about the light, the true light, Jesus, which gives light to everyone, was coming to the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, yet the world did not know him. He came to his own people, and they did not receive him, but to all who did receive him, who believed in his name. What name did God extol over Jesus? What name did God give Jesus when he sent him? Well, it says in Philippians 2, therefore God has highly exalted him and bestowed on him the name that is above every name, so that at that name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of the Father. That's the name that he gave Jesus. John 1, it continues on. But to all who did receive him, who believed in his name, he gives the right to become children of God. We are no longer under the law. New word. Grace of Jesus, who were born not of the blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor of the will of man, but of God. And the Word, Jesus, he became flesh and he dwelt among us, and we have seen the glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. And only through the belief in his name, in his blood, can we then truly be found guiltless. I want to close with just two quick things here. One, this third commandment, it really is challenging us to represent, to revere, to respect, to fear the name of God in all that we do. His name is never supposed to be taken lightly and used meaninglessly. And as followers, if we claim to be followers, we are marked. And therefore, what we say and what we do, it reflects the character of God. Just ask you a question, are you representing God well? Or are you representing him in vain? The last thought here, just if you've tuned out, just check back in just for a second with me. I really believe that following this third commandment, you have to really check the company that you keep. Right? Sometimes people are for who you were, not who you're becoming. If you're not going to take the name of the Lord your God in vain, then you need some people around you that will help you become who God wants you to be. See, some people are going to define you by who you were or who you are, and it's up to you to determine who you will be. Last sentence here. Sometimes we just have to stop living for the applause of others and start to live for the name of God. And when you do that, you will not live a life in vain. You will not live an empty, meaningless life. When everything that you say and everything you do reflects the glory of God. Let me pray. Lord, right now I just know there's some folks probably in here that they realize that this is a difficulty. And God, right now I just would ask that if there's a spot in every person in this room's life, maybe knowingly or unknowingly, that they're just using the Lord's name in vain. Maybe it's with their words, but maybe it's with the way that they're acting or behaving. God, would you just reveal that right now? Just one thing, maybe a step forward, a change to living out this commandment maybe in a newer, fuller way. God, would you just reveal that? And if you're just heads bowed, no one looking around, but if you're seeing something right now or you're experiencing something, just if it's gentle and peaceful, then that's from God. But if right now you're feeling like being condemned and yelled at and you're a fool and you're never gonna, that's the enemy. Just block that out of your mind. Just no. God reveals things through his Spirit in a way that we can hold them, examine them, and move forward. God, I would just help us, Lord. That's just help us live out this commandment in a better way. In your Son's name, amen.